Hello, I'm that geeky gamer, and welcome to my show. Well, there's no doubt about it. When it comes to video games, it's almost impossible to determine how popular they will become. I mean, there are certain games that do get about the amount of attention and acclaim you'd expect them to, but for the most part, it's really hard to tell if something's going to be a success or not. Seriously, when something as fucking shitty as the Madden games can attain any sort of popularity at all, while brilliant gems like Psychonauts and Beyond Good and Evil fade into obscurity, I don't know what the fuck to think. No matter how you look at it though, I don't think you can deny that there definitely are several games out there that are either way too popular or not nearly popular enough. Well, to try and balance this out a little bit, I thought I would give you two top 10 lists today, each representing their respective side of this scale. So, without any further ado, let's just get this show on the road as we begin by taking a look at the top 10 most underrated video games of all time. So before we begin, let me just go over some rules for this list. First of all, I've decided to narrow my choices down to one game per franchise, so you won't just be seeing a list of every game in a single series, or for that matter a list containing an entire franchise for one of the positions on it. I will only pick one game for each spot. Secondly, there will only be one game per gaming platform as well, meaning only one PS3 game, one Xbox game, and so on and so forth. Now, I sort of cheat a bit with this rule, as I've excluded multi-platform games from it, so you can expect to find more than one of those on the list. You might think that's unfair, but hey, my list, my rules. Also, I've tried to vary my choices as much as possible in terms of genre by picking only one game from any one genre as well. Some of the choices might be somewhat debatable in terms of which genre they actually belong to, but I think I've managed to put them in the right categories, at least for the most part. Finally, I've also tried to add some generational variety to my choices, meaning that there might be some games from the same era, but for the most part the list should be pretty varied. So, with those probably overly complicated OCD-inspired rules for this list established, let's just get started. Number 10. The Family Guy video game. Now, I know what you're thinking. What the hell have I been smoking? Well, just hear me out, okay? You see, although this might seem like just another crappy TV show licensed game that will suck more balls than a creepy loner's vacuum cleaner, it's actually not all that bad. The game that, of course, is based on the TV show Family Guy, is basically split up into three parts, each controlled by a separate character, Stewie, Brian or Peter. Stewie's part consists of blowing up everything in sight with a ray gun, Brian's part has him sneaking around gathering items while avoiding detection, and in Peter's part, the goal is to beat up everything and everyone in sight with your hands and feet. While this in and of itself may not be all that great, the thing that makes this game shine is its humor.
He's lying, and he's not Caucasian.
I'm serious, this game is one of the funniest games I've ever played in my entire life. Both the absurdity of the events taking place on screen and the hilarious dialogue and story being told makes this a laugh-out-loud experience from beginning to end, especially if you like the TV show. Okay, so maybe the gameplay can be a bit frustrating at times and it's not exactly the deepest game ever made, but you know what? That doesn't matter. You will still have a great time playing this game since you'll be laughing your ass off every few minutes, and how can that be a bad thing? Besides, the gameplay isn't horrible, it's just not perfect. It's still more than playable, and believe me, there are plenty of games out there that play way worse, yet somehow manage to become much more popular.
Damn these mimes and their invisible walls!
And if you want proof of that, just check out today's other top 10 list. It'll have a few of them. In any case, this game is far from as bad as you might have heard, and I would definitely recommend picking it up, especially if you're a fan of the show. Trust me, it'll be some of the most laugh-filled gaming hours of your life.
Well, splendid! This calls for a sexy party!
Number 9. Heavenly Sword. Okay, so this choice isn't as crazy as the previous one, right? I mean, some people did like this game, but it wasn't exactly a big hit, was it? Seen by many as a somewhat below average ripoff of the God of War games, Heavenly Sword didn't really win over most gamers when it was released, me included. I was intrigued, but not enough to pay full price for it. However, a few years later, when I found it for £10 I decided to give it a try, and you know what? I liked it. I liked it very much. Okay, so it obviously borrowed heavily from the God of War games, but in and of itself, that's not really a problem. Plenty of games borrow or rip off ideas or even entire concepts from other games. That's not really a problem. It's what they do with those ideas that matter. Do they refine it in any way? Do they add anything? Do they give the material any sort of identity of their own? Well, in the case of Heavenly Sword, I would say they did all of that and more. Don't get me wrong, it is very similar to God of War, but again, what's wrong with that? I mean, it's kinda like complaining that your girlfriend looks too much like Scarlett Johansson. She will be mine. Oh yes, she will be mine. Anyway, Heavenly Sword was not that bad. The combat system in it was nice and varied, it had plenty of awesome combos with special moves, and in my opinion, the story was one of the best developed stories for any video game ever. It was written by Andy Serkis, for fuck's sake. In fact, this game had several big name actors attached to it, and believe me, it showed. The quality of the acting and voiceovers were phenomenal, only adding to the overall quality of the game. As said, Heavenly Sword was positively received by some, but for the most part, people overlooked it and in the process missed out on what I consider to be a pretty enjoyable game. It might look like a simple rip-off on the surface, but if you take the time to look a bit deeper, you might just realize that this game is more than worthy of a second look. Number 8. Fatal Inertia. Now, I'm mostly going by the so-called EX version for the PS3 here, but from what I understand, the differences between the versions basically boils down to some fairly minor tweaks and improvements, like some changes to the difficulty and a few new levels. In any case, I'm basing this mostly on the EX version, as that's the version I've tried. Anywho, Fatal Inertia is one of those games that doesn't seem to be anything that special, but then you try it and realize that it actually does have quite a lot to offer. If you're at all interested in racing games, you owe it to yourself to check this game out. It has some pretty good tracks, a fairly decent selection of upgradable vehicles of various qualities, and several fun and interesting weapons to be used at your own discretion. It also has some pretty fast and intense racing, and isn't that all you want from a futuristic racing game? I honestly don't know what else you would want from this type of game. It seems to cover all the bases, and it covers them well. Okay, so it might not be perfect, but the flaws are more than outweighed by the positive sides. I honestly think this game simply fell between the cracks of more popular titles, not really having received enough marketing. Seriously, can you remember hearing all that much about it? I mean, it might just be me, but I honestly don't think I heard about it until it suddenly popped up on the PlayStation Network. Either way, it definitely hasn't received the attention it deserves, and I encourage all fans of racing games to give it a shot. Number 7. Hogs of War. What do pigs, grenade launchers, and the Liberty Bell March have in common? They're all in this game, and if that's not enough to sell you on it, I don't know what is. Seriously, it's a game where pigs blow each other up with rockets, rifles, grenades, and whatever else in order to take over as much land as possible. How can you not love that? Again, it's a game where pigs wage war! I mean, talk about making bacon! Okay, so that was a really lame joke, but I still have a point. Do I really need to go into any more detail here? The concept of this game alone should have been enough to make it way more popular than it became. If you really need a bit more though, just think worms in 3D with pigs and you pretty much have this game. Now, some might take that to mean that it's just a bad ripoff, but it's not. It's a game with pigs waging war! It's fucking brilliant! Okay, so I will admit that it does have a few minor problems, like the controls could have been a bit better and the AI can be annoyingly accurate almost all the time, but none of that matters when I remember that it's a game containing pigs blowing each other to bacon bits. We need more games like this today, okay? We need more games that dares to do something completely ridiculous once in a while. That's why I say that the concept alone should be enough for people to pick it up, but just to be safe, the game itself is really good as well. It has great weapons, a good upgrade system which gives each player the ability to create their own personalized team, and it has some pretty decent humor as well.
God blimey, I do believe I've croaked!
All this and more is why I say that Hogs of War is one game that should have been picked up by way more gamers than it was, and here's hoping that more gamers decide to give it a try.
My teeth are upside down.
Number 6. Bonanza Brothers. Don't let the simple design of this game fool you, it's actually pretty damn great. Originally released for arcades, Bonanza Brothers will later be ported to several platforms, including the Commodore 64, the Sega Mega Drive and the Sega Master System, a port which just happens to be my personal favorite. The goal of the game is very simple. You take control of either Robo or Mobo, also called Mike and Spike in some regions, and infiltrate a building, steal a set number of items and escape as unharmed as possible. Several guards of various types will try to stop you, which means that you will occasionally have to deal with them by shooting them with your stun gun or knocking them out with some sort of trap. You can also hide behind or next to certain objects in certain levels in order to get away from the guards, all of which adds up to a pretty damn fun game with a sort of cops and robbers feel to it, I guess. Now, this obviously isn't exactly a very deep or complex game, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, is it? I mean, not every game out there needs to be Mass Effect or Assassin's Creed. Sometimes it's okay to be simple and small. In fact, that's a pretty good rule to live by in real life as well. Sometimes it's okay to be simple and small. What? Anyway, Bonanza Brothers is a more than average arcade game, and anyone who's willing to look past its simplicity should be pleasantly surprised. So here's hoping more people will try to find this hidden treasure of a game and give it a try. It certainly deserves it. Number 5. Shadow of Memories, or Shadow of Destiny if you live in North America. Oh yeah, now we're talking. This game is awesome. It's fucking weird, but that's kind of why it's so awesome. You see, this game is all about one very, very serious subject. Death! No, seriously, this game is all about figuring out the cause of the main character Ike's death and trying to find a way to prevent it. This in itself is strange enough, but the weirdness doesn't end there. In fact, even the opening of the game is very unusual. I mean, how many games do you know of that actually starts off with the main character's death? No, really, that's what happens. The very first experience we get in this game is watching our protagonist die. Huh, short game, but okay. No, of course the game doesn't end with that. Instead, Ike wakes up in some sort of strange place that's neither heaven nor hell, and is greeted by a strange creature that offers Ike the ability to go back in time and stop whatever or whoever is causing his death. In order to do this, Ike is given a device called a digipad, which allows him to travel through time. Over the course of the game, Ike uses the digipad to travel to various periods of history to prevent what seems like a straightforward murder at first, but is revealed to be a much bigger conspiracy spanning hundreds of years. Although that setting and story should, in my opinion, be more than enough to intrigue gamers, I guess I do kind of see why it never became all that popular. I mean, there's almost nothing normal about it. Everything is very strange and bizarre. The setting and story is pretty unusual, the style is fairly unique, and the gameplay is completely different from most other games, especially mainstream games. I could definitely understand how people could be a bit weirded out by this game, and I think that was part of the problem. People like me loved it partly because it was so unusual and different, but to others it was just a bit too different, it just scared them away. Whatever caused this game to become the fairly obscure cult game that it did, there's no doubt in my mind that more gamers owe it to themselves to pick it up. If you can look past the somewhat unusual elements of this game, you should be treated to a very distinctive but still enjoyable experience. Shadow of Memories at least deserves much more attention than it has received so far.
All right. Hold still, please.
Number 4. Parappa the Rapper 2. Talk about being overshadowed by a predecessor. Although plenty of gamers have at least heard of the original Parappa the Rapper, you know, the rhythm game for the original PlayStation featuring a rapping paper cutout dog named Parappa, the sequel isn't quite as well known. Hell, some of you might actually be sitting there wondering if I'm making this up, but rest assured, this game does exist and it kicks ass. Being pretty much the same type of game as the first Parappa the Rapper, I shouldn't really need to explain the gameplay in much detail, but just in case you're not familiar with it, I'll quickly explain it. Music plays, you press buttons to match the rhythm, and the more precise you are, the better your score becomes. I know this may not sound like much, and that's because it really isn't. No, seriously, the gameplay in this game isn't really all that much to brag about, but then again, it's not really supposed to be, is it? No, these sort of games are more about music and perfecting your skills. Is anyone else having déjà vu? No, these games are usually more about perfecting your skills, if any, and doing so to some hopefully decent, if not downright awesome tunes. Okay, so I've pointed this out before, but yeah, this isn't really about the gameplay, at least not first and foremost, but you know what? It doesn't matter! I know this sounds weird, but games can actually be about more than just brilliant gameplay. You can make it about the music and humor instead, and this is a perfect example of that. The tunes in this game are hip-hop based, as they were in the original as well, and although I'm not really a big fan of the genre, there's no denying that these tunes are awesome. They have great beats, cool riffs, and also some pretty decent humor at times. That's actually an element of this game that surprised me the most. It's pretty damn funny. Don't get me wrong, the original had its share of funny moments as well, but the sequel really shines in the humor department. I mean, just the overall plot is pretty amusing. It's all about how all the food in Parappa's town is being turned into noodles. Why? Well, because some guy really loves noodles. That's just so silly you can't help but laugh at it. In addition to that, there are several scenes throughout the game that just forces you to chuckle. For instance, take the scene where a shrinking ray in Parappa's home is going haywire and several people just happen to drop by.
Pizza delivery.
Cleaning service.
Visitor from space.
Just walking by.
Hello.
Anybody home?
Maybe son.
Konnichiwa.
What's up?
Admit it, that made you laugh, and if you say otherwise, you're a fucking liar! There's plenty of other reasons to pick this game up, but I don't want to ruin it for you. If you can find this game, don't even think about leaving it. Pick it up immediately. It deserves to be played by a lot more gamers.
Yeah, Parappa. Was that a party or what?
It surely was. I hope you all had a great time too.
Number 3. Cooler World, known as Rollaway if you're American, or Cooler Quest if you're Japanese. Okay, show of hands. Who's actually heard of this one? Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, I guess I should explain just what the hell kind of game this is then. Cooler World is a game about a ball. No, really, it's about a ball. Stop looking at me like that, I'm not kidding, it's about a ball. Knock it off! It's true, this game is all about guiding a ball around a maze while collecting various items and getting a hold of a key to open the door to the next level. Yep, it's a puzzle game, and a fucking brilliant one at that. Not only are you controlling a ball, which has to be one of the most unique video game characters ever, but the levels are also extremely well designed, with a lot of clever ideas. For instance, you don't only move down hallways or passages, you have to roll on top, underneath, on the sides, and just about anywhere else you can think of moving on square boxes. There are also hazards to look out for, like spikes and areas where you can fall off the level. You also have to get to certain items and areas within specific time limits at times, and sometimes you even have to avoid certain items in order to complete a level. For a game that seems extremely simple at first, it turns out to be surprisingly complex and addictive. This is a type of game that you can start off with the intention of just playing for a few minutes, and then when you turn it off, you realize you actually skipped dinner. 2 days ago. I know that puzzle games aren't generally for everyone, but honestly, I can't see how anyone could dislike this game. Even if you're not really into puzzle games, this is the game that could change your mind, or at least be an exception to the rule, because I don't think you'll be able to put it down anytime soon. It's just way too fun and addicting. It's sort of like the gaming equivalent of pot. You know, because pot's so much fun. And addictive, but mostly fun. Don't do drugs. In any case, I don't really know why this game didn't do so well, especially since it apparently was relatively popular upon release. According to Wikipedia, Cooler World sold so well that copies became very rare and hard to come by. I guess that could explain why it's not more popular, but I still don't think that's the whole story. I think it also has to do with the fact that most people probably considered it more of a niche game meant for hardcore fans of puzzle games only, which might not be the biggest market. It truly is a shame that so many people passed this game up, because it's definitely one of the best puzzle games I've ever played. If you can manage to get a hold of it, which you should if you have a PS3 seeing as it's actually available on the PlayStation Network store, at least in Europe and Japan, don't let it pass you by. I would encourage all gamers to pick this one up, even if it's not really your type of game. You'll probably still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Number 2. Transbot. If you have actually heard of this game, you deserve a fucking medal. Hell, if you've actually played it, you're probably just as pathetic as I am. But at least you know why it's on this list! Seriously though, this game truly is a masterpiece. If you don't know, which you probably don't, Transbot is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up for the Sega Master System. You control a spaceship that has the ability to transform into 6 different forms with 6 different weapons. The objective is simple enough: fly through the level while blasting away as many enemies as possible. What makes this game stand out when compared to other shmups are the transformations and the way they're activated. While playing the game, you normally fly around in the standard A configuration. However, once in a while a truck appears on the ground that releases a question mark object when destroyed. If you pick up the question mark, a selection box at the top of the screen will begin to scroll. While it scrolls, you can stop it at any time and your ship will transform into whichever configuration you choose. Now, some of you might be thinking, can you really choose the configuration yourself? Doesn't the selector move a bit too fast for you to actually make the choice yourself? Well, no, actually it doesn't. It's absolutely possible to stop the selection at whatever choice you want, especially with a bit of practice, and it's not like you're not supposed to be able to do that either. A big part of this game is being able to choose the best weapons for the situations you face. Sometimes you might want the rockets, other times you may want the short-range spread shot. There is also a choice that doesn't change the weapon, but rather refills your ship's shields, which adds yet another element of strategy to the game. One thing you might be thinking at this point is that this game is weirdly similar to Transformers. I mean, the main character is a transforming robot, for crying out loud. Well, guess what? This game apparently was inspired by Transformers, and let's face it, it shows. However, there's nothing about it that makes it seem like a rip-off either. It's something completely different, but still very similar. Besides, even if you were to look at it as a rip-off, not that I can see how you could, I think you'd agree that it's still a better Transformers game than a lot of the official Transformers games. Any way you look at it though, this game is, at least as far as I can see, nearly erased from the gaming universe. I'm not exactly sure why, as I honestly do think it's one of the better shooters out there, but the fact that it was on the Master System probably had something to do with it. Whatever the cause though, more gamers owe it to themselves to check this game out if they ever get the chance. It's definitely more than meets the eye. So which game could possibly be more overlooked than those? Which game could be more deserving of a closer look and of more playthroughs? Plenty of games probably, but I've made my choice and I'm sticking to it, damn it! Anyway, let's just get right to it and find out which game lands the number 1 spot. The number 1 most underrated video game of all time is... Sonic the Hedgehog 2. What? You're surprised? Were you expecting something else? Why? It's not like this was ever the most popular game around. I mean, it was considered to be a pretty good game, but it was never all that well known among gamers, and it certainly isn't all that acknowledged today. Honestly, what's so strange about putting this game on this What? What did you say? A big Mega Drive hit? What? Oh, I see. You think I'm talking about the Mega Drive game. No. I'm talking about the 8-bit game, of course. The Mega Drive game. You stupid fox. Yes, it's true, there actually was another game called Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for Sega's 2 8-bit systems, the Master System and the Game Gear. While almost everyone seems to know about the Mega Drive game, the same cannot be said about this game. Although this was, as I said, considered a pretty good game and it did sell a decent amount of copies, it still wasn't all that popular compared to other games of the time, least of all its 16-bit counterpart. Nowadays, it seems to be even less known. I mean, I know that's somewhat understandable considering its age and all, but why is it that everyone seems to remember the Mega Drive games, but almost no one remembers this one? Well, the fact that neither the Master System nor the Game Gear was all that popular outside of Europe and Japan probably had something to do with it. I mean, when the biggest share of the market all but ignores a system, chances are it's not going to be remembered all that well. There probably are other reasons for this game's lack of popularity as well, but all you need to know is that it's nowhere near as popular as it should be. For that matter, none of the 8-bit Sonic games are. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I for one consider them to be better than the Mega Drive games. At least they can be, and when it comes to Sonic 2, this version is way better than the Mega Drive one. Don't get me wrong, the Mega Drive game is fantastic too, but in my opinion, this 8-bit gem is much more enjoyable. I'm not sure if it's the charm of the lesser graphics or the somewhat simpler gameplay, or maybe the music has something to do with it, but this is just a better game. It's more streamlined, more focused, and overall just more fun. I will admit that I wasn't quite sure if I should pick this or Sonic Chaos for the top spot. You see, Sonic Chaos is another overlooked Sonic game for the 8-bit systems that kicks an insane amount of ass. However, when it came down to it, I just enjoyed Sonic 2 a little bit more, and I actually think it's a bit more overlooked. Sonic Chaos isn't exactly a household name either, but I do think it has a slightly bigger following than this game. Now, I know I haven't exactly described this game in great detail yet, and I don't intend to. Why? Well, first of all, you should already know how a good side-scrolling Sonic game basically works, and secondly, I want you to experience this game for yourself, and therefore, I don't want to spoil anything. You should all just get a hold of this game and try it out for yourselves. You will love it, and the game deserves, no, it needs the attention. You can get the Master System version on the Virtual Console, and the Game Gear version is available on various compilation discs. There is no reason I can think of for any gamer not to get this game, and it's an utter shame and an incredible embarrassment that we as gamers could allow this shining emerald of a game to fade into obscurity. There is no doubt in my mind that Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the 8-bit version, is the most underrated video game of all time. And there you have it. Those were my choices, and even if you don't agree with them, I think you can at least agree that there are a lot of underappreciated games out there. However, there are also a lot of games that should never have been played by anyone that somehow managed to establish insanely huge fan bases. Well, considering we just took a look at some games that deserve a bit more attention, I think we should also take a look at some games that deserve way less attention. Even though that technically gives them more attention, which is sort of the opposite of what I want to do, which kind of ruins the point, I guess. But hey, at least it'll be fun, right? Right?